there is more peace somewhere.
Thank you, David. All right. I think about music sometimes, and I think, if we didn't have music, it's hard to imagine what the world would be like, without music. And there was a Catholic monk, Boniface Hardin. You may have heard of him. He was an activist, African-American Catholic monk. And he wrote, "If we didn't have music, dancers would be soldiers too, holding guns in their arms instead of each other." And I think about that, and I think about if we didn't have music, if we didn't have art, if we didn't have beauty, if we didn't have dancing, what would we become? Might we all become like soldiers? Might we all become, antagonistic towards each other? The beauty, there's something about the beauty of life, the music of life, the movement of life that I think helps us to feel more alive, or the way I would say it today, feed our soul. Have you ever seen like a group of dogs all trying to eat from the same dish? You know what happens? There's a couple of dominant dogs that will keep all the other smaller dogs away until they're fed. Well, Biet Simkin, who wrote the book, Don't Just Sit There, it's a book about meditation in your daily life. She said that the mind and the body are like ravenous animals that always want to eat first, and the soul ends up eating last, if at all, because the mind and the body are always trying to get fed first, and they're really good at it. Now, she also writes that the eyes are like the mouth for the soul, taking in beauty, and I'll say the ears and other senses can be like that to help feed the soul. Now, I'll give you an example. The other day, I was down by the river, and I was watching the most beautiful sunset. And it was gorgeous. So, immediately my mind says, you should take a picture of this and put it on Facebook. So I turned my back to the sunset, and I got my phone out, and I started to snap a picture. Of course, I had to get the right angle. It took a few shots to get it right. Then once I got it, I sort of got in here, and I wanted to edit it a little bit to kind of bring out the colors. You know how we do that. And then I had to post it on Facebook. It was taking forever, but I was getting it up there. And of course, while I was looking at my phone, I noticed that I'd gotten a couple of texts, while it was in my pocket. So then my mind's like, that's important. You better look at those. And then my mind said, you better answer those. Pretty soon, by the time I got done fiddling with this thing, I had missed the heart of the sunset. And that's the way the mind works. And the body also sometimes will, it wants to get its needs met. So it's like, I'm hungry, I'm too hungry or thirsty. I want to go get something to drink. I've seen sunsets before. Let me go. And so we will walk away from a masterpiece in the museum or something like that because our body is, we're like, I'm too tired, my legs. And then we'll miss the moment that could just feed and fill our soul. Now, I know you might be thinking, what is this thing that Marlin's calling the soul? Especially in a humanist service, it's even more like, what's all this talk about the soul? When I talk about the soul, I'm talking about that part of us that makes meaning. I'm talking about the experience of love and joy and trust in relationships. That part of us that can experience love and trust and joy in relationships. The soul is that part of a person that gives us an innate sense of our own goodness and interconnectedness and agency. Now, the soul is connected to the body and the brain, but unlike the body and the brain, when these physical parts of a person have holes in them, they often cannot be fixed, right? Like if you have a hole in your brain, if you have brain damage, it can't really be fixed. If you have different holes in your body, a lot of times, they can't be fixed. But the good thing is that holes in the soul, those parts of ourselves that can feel love and joy and trust in relationships, the part of ours that knows that we're innately good, those parts of ourselves can be healed. Those holes can be filled. Now the question might be, well, how do we get these holes in our souls? Sometimes it comes because we experience violence from somebody else. It's traumatic. Trauma causes holes, wounds, if you will, to that part of ourselves that we call the soul. Being neglected or abused or oppressed all cause trauma, and trauma causes holes in the soul. Some people have a parent or had a parent or a spouse who was addicted or mentally ill, and their actions or their lack of attention created a soul wound. Maybe you had an abusive teacher or preacher or boss, someone who you had to count on and who you looked up to, who was constantly critical or inappropriate. Maybe you were bullied or excluded because of your gender or your ethnicity or your sexual orientation, and you were made to feel less than, or because you didn't have as much money as some of the others. Or if you've been violent or abusive or addicted, that can cause holes to form in your soul. Even witnessing these things, witnessing violence against somebody else can cause holes. That's traumatic. And also, the good news is, though, that these holes can be repaired. That's the good news. And then even for those who've escaped sort of the deeper traumas of life, our soul can become just malnourished from lack of attention, lack of feeding, due to our fast-paced, highly materialistic society. And instead of feeding the soul, people try to grab joy and energy from anything they can, on this material plane, through money, through status, through being liked, through drugs or alcohol or pornography or transgressive relationships. We're looking for ways, give me that, I need some energy. I need some life. My life doesn't feel like enough. I feel weak. I feel tired. I feel just worn out by the conflicts and the problems, parenting, whatever it is. Marriage, not being married, looking for somebody to marry, whatever, but we can feel ourselves feeling drained, and we're looking anywhere we can. Give me that drink, give me that this, give me that. Find me somebody to flirt with, something, but make me feel some energy. It's because our soul, and we're looking to fill our soul in all the wrong places. A woman named Elaine. She happens to be African American. She comes from a working class family, and neither of her parents went to college or anything. But ever since she was a little girl, she imagined herself being a professional, high-powered, somebody who wore a power suit and had an office and a nice desk. And sure enough, when the time came, she achieved her goal. And when she landed her first job, she talks about walking in there looking like $1 million and just feeling great. And as people got to know her, she quickly worked her way up the ladder throughout her company, which meant nicer offices, more responsibility, more money, more respect. And she was living the dream, so to speak. But after a few years, she started to realize that she wasn't feeling really filled. She was actually quite dilapidated, quite drained in her life. And in fact, when she realized that, she's like, I'm working too much. This work is not fulfilling my life. And so she told her sister what she was going to do. And her sister, as hard as her sister tried to convince her, don't do it, Elaine walked into her boss's office the next day and quit. She didn't know what she was going to do. But she said as soon as she did, she felt this incredible and enormous weight come off of her. And she felt light and she felt free. And she promised herself right in that moment she would never do anything that robbed her of her sense of who she is and what's most important to her, the meaning and the purpose of her life. And she had some soul wounds just from growing up a woman in a culture that often doesn't see and fully respect women for what they have, and as an African American as well. And that part of her that makes meaning was being crowded out by her drive for material success. That part of her that experiences love and joy and trust was seeking validation outside of herself, not that innate sense of goodness that the soul just pervades before it gets broken. We know that we're just good in the world. But then that innate sense gets broken, and then we seek validation outside. That's what she realized she was doing. So as it turns out, Elaine ended up staying with the company. But she started to wear clothes that more reflected who she was. She began to manage her schedule and her projects in ways that allowed her to build friendships, that allowed her to volunteer in her community, and to travel for fun. She started to fill her soul. So let's talk about how you and I might nourish our souls. Because our mind and our body are always trying to starve out the soul of the sustenance because they want to get fed first. So as I mentioned, the eyes can be like a mouth for the soul, so can the ears and other senses. So experiencing moments of beauty, but doing it with mindfulness, like really experiencing them, really settling in and being present with the beauty that's around us. It could mean going to some place and watching a sunset or a sunrise, or walking through the botanical gardens, or visiting a museum, but not just walking through until your lower back starts hurting and just kind of zipping through to see it. Oh, I'm going to check this off my list. I got to see this thing and that thing. But actually, like, sit in front of a masterpiece and just take it in. What was this artist trying to say? What can I absorb from this amazing piece of work that has been handed down and put in a museum? What is it about this work of beauty? And creating art also feeds the soul. Even if you're not an artist, just the act of creation is that. I know President Bush, W, as we like to call him, he started painting after he retired. He started painting the portraits of soldiers who'd been wounded in the wars that he helped to start as president. Wars of choice that he chose. And so that's a heavy burden to bear. All those who died because of that choice, those choices, and all those who were wounded. And so he started to paint. And he talks about how it's an act of healing for him. And I wondered to myself, what if he would have started painting while he was president? First thing in the morning, before he got up and thought about what he was going to do in international affairs and other things. But feeding the soul is so important. Meditation is a great way to feed the soul. And we can even do it by eating mindfully. I did this the other day, not that long ago. I did it while eating an orange. And instead of mindlessly, sucking down slices of this orange while watching TV or talking on the phone, I just decided to I'm going to eat this orange with complete presence and mindfulness. I closed my eyes. I experienced peeling it and eating it. I'm telling you, it was a peak experience. And I don't say that lightly. The sound of the peel cracking off, the spray of the oils and the scent, the cool little trickle of juice running down my forearm, tickling me as it went down. The flavor practically exploded in my mouth. I'm like, wow, tastes so good. Before it was over, I realized that the sun and the clouds and the rain and the earth are all in this orange and now in me. I felt joy and interconnected to all life and nature. It was an amazing experience, all because I slowed down and decided to eat that blessed orange as the main event. Now, listening to a gorgeous piece of music, that feeds the soul. Now, I don't mean, while raking leaves or on the treadmill. I mean, as the main event, listening, putting on an album. I guess I'm showing my age. Putting on an 8-track tape. I don't know, listening to Spotify, whatever we do now. But really just saying, I'm going to listen to music now for the next, 45 minutes or something like that. A great jazz album, a great classical album, whatever music you love and turns you on, that feeds your soul. When we make time to feed our souls, we become better people. We become more relaxed. We become more able to handle the tensions and the divisions and the difficulties of our lives. There was a man named Daniel whose wife was pregnant and he was in the hospital because she was about to give birth. She was going to have a cesarean procedure. And before she went in, before it started, actually she'd gone in, but the doctor came out to see him, and the doctor found out that Daniel was a musician because they were, chatting. And the doctor said, "I wish I'd become a musician." And it was just an interesting comment. And then he went in, the baby came out, the doctor came out and said to Daniel, "You have a beautiful baby, your wife's doing great, the baby's great." And Daniel looked at him and he said, actually, just as they were talking, another doctor who was in the operation room with him came out and said, "Doctor, I just want to tell you what a joy it was to work with you, to watch you work. You are really great at what you do." And then he said goodbye and walked on. And Daniel said, "So, doctor, do you still really wish that you'd become a musician? You just gave birth to a baby, and you clearly have the respect and the admiration of the people around you." And the doctor looked at him and was thinking for a second. He said, "I know why I performed so well today. Because this morning, when I got up, I spent an hour playing Chopin on the piano." When we feed our soul, when we take the time to fill our tank, the one that's most important, the one about love, the one about trust, the one about joy, when we fill our tank, we perform better. It's not selfish what we do. We're doing it in a way that makes the world a better place, not just our life better, but the world a better place. So here's what I'm thinking. Because it's important to find ways to fill our soul in our daily lives, which means we have to hold back the wild animals of our mind and our body sometimes, long enough anyway for the soul to get its nourishment. So let's feast. Let's have a feast for the soul right now, right here. I'm going to ask our guest musicians to come forward. Now, during this next musical performance, don't take out your phone to post this live on Facebook. And forget about whatever it is you know you're going to need to do after you get out of here. Just let that go for a moment. Sit as comfortably as you can in those awful chairs of ours. But sit as comfortably as you can so your body doesn't distract you, so you can really take it in. This music that you're about to hear is a banquet for the soul. Let it fill the cracks. Let it seep into the dry places like rain on parched soil. Let it shower you like the mist of a waterfall, cleansing your soul. Now, for some today, as we heard, this is the beginning of a new year, a new beginning. Perhaps you'll let it be so for you.